One of NASA's biggest worries about its lunar program right now is that SpaceX's Starship isn't developing as quickly as they'd hoped. The main obstacle? Reliable orbital refueling, a critical step that Starship still hasn't fully mastered. But what if Starship didn't need to refuel at all? Interestingly, that idea might not be as far-fetched as it sounds. In fact, NASA explored something similar decades ago, a concept they ultimately shelved. Back when NASA was founded in 1958, the agency started dreaming of a launch vehicle that could go beyond Earth orbit, one powerful enough to carry astronauts all the way to the moon in a single flight. That concept became known as NOVA. NOVA was at the heart of NASA's very first long-term space exploration roadmap, officially presented to President Eisenhower on January 27, 1959. Its goal was simple, yet incredibly bold: a direct ascent to the moon, meaning the rocket would lift off from Earth, fly straight to the lunar surface, and land in one continuous trip. No assembling spacecraft in orbit, no docking maneuvers around the moon, just one massive rocket doing it all. To make that possible, NOVA had to be an absolute behemoth, bigger, taller, and more powerful than even the legendary Saturn V. Its enormous diameter allowed it to house more engines and carry a much heavier payload. The first stage was essentially a supersized version of the Saturn V's SIC, loaded with 8 F1 engines producing an astonishing 61,925 kilonewtons of thrust. The second stage followed the same philosophy, featuring 8 J2 engines generating another 8,265 kilonewtons. Finally, the third stage, a stretched version of the SIVB, would complete the journey to the moon. In this configuration, NOVA could have lifted an incredible 210,000 kilograms to low Earth orbit, or 74,000 kilograms on a direct lunar trajectory, enough to deliver an entire moon base in one shot. So why didn't it happen? The reason was surprisingly simple. NASA didn't have a building big enough to make it. The Michoud Assembly Facility's roof just wasn't tall enough to handle a 12-meter-wide rocket with 8 F1 engines. At best, they could only manage a 10-meter design with 4 or 5 engines. So NASA scaled back the plan, and that's how we ended up with the Saturn V instead. To be fair, Saturn V did exactly what NASA needed at the time. It sent a few astronauts and a small payload to the moon, achieving the political goal of the era. But imagine if NOVA had been built. NASA could have launched rovers, habitats, and entire outposts in a single mission, everything required for a permanent lunar presence. Now here's where things start to get really interesting. SpaceX's Starship actually shares a lot of DNA with NOVA, and in terms of raw power, Starship even outperforms it. The first stage, powered by 33 Raptor engines, generates up to 73.5 megajoules of thrust, easily surpassing NOVA's first stage. The second stage, with 6 more Raptors, also beats NOVA's upper stage in sheer muscle. Sure, Starship's specific impulse is slightly lower, but its vacuum-optimized Raptors help close that gap. Its dry mass is a bit heavier than NOVA's upper stage, but not by much. So here's a thought. What if we combined NOVA's old-school design philosophy with Starship's modern tech, creating a NOVA Starship hybrid? That could give us a fully self-contained lunar rocket, one that wouldn't need any orbital refueling at all. I mean, how hard could it be? Right? First off, SpaceX's Starship and Super Heavy combo is already an incredible system. On paper, it's designed to lift around 100 tons into low Earth orbit, fully reusable. That alone is a major feat. But if the goal is a single non-stop trip to the moon with no refueling, Starship would need to shift to a fully expendable configuration. That means giving up reusability for this mission. No heat shield, no nose cone. Swap it out for a payload fairing instead. Remove the fins, and forget saving any fuel for a landing burn. The mission objective is simple: maximize performance. The booster's only job would be to push Starship onto a near-orbital trajectory, letting the upper stage take over from there. With all those optimizations, it's totally reasonable to expect 250 to 300 tons delivered to a near-orbital path using a fully expendable Starship upper stage. Now, there's another key difference to think about. Nova was a 3-stage rocket, and that's a big part of why it could reach the moon on its own. Back in the Apollo era, that's also why the Saturn V didn't need orbital refueling. It had multiple stages doing the heavy lifting. The first stage, the Saturn 1C, blasted through the thick atmosphere. The second, the Saturn II, carried the stack almost into orbit. And finally, the lightweight Saturn 4B completed the push to orbit and performed the trans-lunar injection burn. That final stage was key. It was large but relatively light, restartable, and efficient enough to handle 2 major burns. NASA tested other configurations too, the 1.5-stage Mercury Atlas, the 2-stage Titan II for Gemini, and the Saturn IB for early Apollo missions. But those were all short-term designs made for specific goals. If Starship really wants to reach the moon in one continuous flight, adopting a 3-stage setup might be the missing piece. Right now, Starship sacrifices a lot of potential payload by hauling dead weight all the way to orbit. So what if it had its own 3rd stage tucked inside that massive payload bay? Surprisingly, that's actually possible. Starship's fairing is enormous, big enough to fit something roughly the size of ULA's Centaur 3 upper stage, the same one used on the Vulcan rocket. But while a Centaur would physically fit, it wouldn't quite match the performance of Nova's 3rd stage. The Centaur runs on hydrolox, liquid hydrogen, and liquid oxygen, and typically uses 2 RL-10 engines. Even if you doubled that to 4 RL-10s, you'd only get about 96,000 pounds of thrust, or roughly 430 kilonewtons total. By comparison, Nova's 3rd stage used a single J2 engine that produced around 232,000 pounds of thrust, or about 1,030 kilonewtons, more than double the power with the same propellant type. Even if that setup provided enough performance, it would still come with serious complications. For starters, Centaur belongs to ULA, and Starship is SpaceX's domain, 2 rival companies that rarely collaborate. Without NASA acting as a go-between, that partnership would be unlikely. Then there are the technical issues. Fueling a Centaur while it's sealed inside Starship's fairing would be extremely difficult. If it were fueled beforehand, hydrogen boil-off would quickly become a problem, not to mention the obvious safety risks of enclosing a cryogenic stage inside another spacecraft. That said, if a Starship Centaur concept ever made sense, the most practical route would be for SpaceX to build its own version, a Starship variant designed to carry and operate a cryogenic upper stage, whether that's Centaur-like or something entirely new. Honestly, though, the best option might be simpler. Design a new expendable 3rd stage built specifically for Starship, using the same construction methods and materials SpaceX already masters. There have already been a few concepts tossed around for that idea. And the main goal is simple. Build a low-cost, expendable 3rd stage using the same stainless steel construction as Starship itself, powered by a single off-the-shelf Raptor engine. This stage would use a standard sea-level Raptor, which delivers about 356 seconds of specific impulse in a vacuum. Because of Starship's height limitations, a large vacuum nozzle wouldn't fit inside the fairing. So, rather than stretching the engine bell for slightly better efficiency, it makes more sense to increase tank size. Extra propellant adds far more performance than a small gain in ISP ever could. The Raptor engine is powerful, almost too powerful for a stage this small. Even throttled down to 25% power, the end-of-burn acceleration would still be around 30% higher than what a Falcon 9's upper stage experiences. If that throttle range isn't possible, SpaceX could easily develop a modified Raptor optimized for smoother, lighter burns. The proposed 3rd stage would carry roughly 94 metric tons of propellant, which seems to hit the sweet spot for pushing payloads onto a trans-lunar trajectory. No refueling required. Since Starship's total payload to low Earth orbit is about 150 tons, That still leaves around 50 tons of usable payload, even with the third stage attached. To make it all fit inside Starship's 9-meter payload bay, the stage would probably use short-domed cylindrical tanks rather than spherical ones. That design would fit comfortably, standing about 8 meters tall, leaving roughly 11 meters of space for payload and adapters. In short, a simple, expendable third stage, built with the same materials and engines as Starship, could massively extend its reach. It wouldn't require complex refueling or unproven technologies, just a clever reuse of what SpaceX already does best. A Nova-like 3-stage Starship would come with both advantages and trade-offs. On the plus side, adding a third stage would significantly boost Starship's performance for high delta-V missions, the kind that need big energy changes to reach farther destinations. And if it's designed for low-cost production, it could also cut mission expenses by removing the need for complex orbital refueling, a big win for a program like Artemis. Without the need to refuel in space, SpaceX could speed up development on a moon-specific Starship variant, keeping timelines on track and easing NASA's concerns. That said, there wouldn't be much economic benefit for satellite launches to geostationary transfer orbit or even most lunar missions. But for Mars or direct-to-GEO and deeper interplanetary missions beyond Mars or Venus, a third stage could save significant money. Since it would essentially be a smaller Starship, no heat shield, no fairing, no fins, no landing gear, and no header tanks, the development costs would be far lower than the full Super Heavy system. High delta-V missions aren't that common yet, so it might take time before development costs pay off. But as Starship's low launch costs drive up demand, that payoff could come sooner than expected. Government customers like NASA and the U.S. Space Force, who often fund high-energy missions, might even help bankroll its development. Plus, for commercial clients, removing the need for multiple tanker flights and refueling operations could reduce mission risk, making Starship a more attractive option overall. In the future, direct-to-GEO missions could become far more common. Starship could deliver even the largest satellites directly to orbit at a fraction of today's cost. In that context, developing a third stage could provide a real return on investment within a few years. Of course, orbital refueling will still matter long-term. It's essential for keeping Starship reusable while still reaching deep space. But until that system matures, a 3-stage Nova-style Starship might just be the shortcut that gets humanity back to the moon, and beyond, a whole lot faster.